Hey guys, welcome to this video, and in this video we will be talking about the protocol buffers, or you can also call this Protobuf.js. So basically protocol buffers are a type of, are similar uh, encodings like JSON, but they are kind of different, okay? Let me just get this clear. You make a JSON, you send the data in JSON format to the server, or get data from the server in JSON format, but instead you can also use Protobuf format, which is a kind of like a binary format, and it compresses down. You change your JSON data into a binary data. So yeah, it saves the space. It's not human readable. It's encrypted. It's protected. But on if you're only working on websites, working on specifically server to server talking or stuff like that, I will not prefer you to use Protobuf request type unless until unless and protection, unless and security is not much of a concern, because by default the browsers are much more familiar with reading the JSON files, JSON type easily, other than reading this protocol buffers type. So it will take double to triple response and time to actually get these protocol buffers requests other than getting a normal JSON request. So yeah, you need to understand these basic things. Like browsers are more better with reading JSON type file and JSON type requests other than reading the other protocol buffer type requests. So let me just give you one live example real quick about the protocol buffers. We'll go to 777.in. Okay, I put here a random number. I will put here some password. I will click on login. So they send the login request, and you may not understand or notice already in the headers they're setting the content type as x-protobuf, and in the payload we are getting this data like this. So this is actually they are actually sending the data to the server in a protobuf format, so it's encrypted. So guys like me cannot you know make these kind of requests unless until I don't have their proto file, or unless I don't have their code that they are wrote for having these kind of requests. So if I do a little bit of research, I will eventually find their proto code, but that's not the question of that I'm also talking about here. In the preview, you can see already also they got the response back in proto format, and you can it's non-human readable. So these are encrypted requests. And the thing is, like, the good thing is that they eventually console log the actual values of the both things. So in the console log, we got to see the area code. So this is what they sent in the request to the server, and this is what they got back from the response. So we saw account doesn't exist, but we didn't saw the code here. So yeah, we dig out both the things, and here you can see we do get to see both of the things because they're console logging it. And if we go to the line, I'll go to this particular line. It gets us to this here, and you can see the response time did saying area buffer. So if you're using Fetch APIs to actually make a request of this, to actually accept the protobuf buffer encoding type, what you have to do, you need to say, usually say, okay, get the response, and then say response.json. You need to say response.array buffer, and afterwards when you get the data, actually you say data, get the data, then say array buffer, and then put your data in here, and you will get to see this the buffer type of your data. But then you need to decode your data into a normal JSON type. So we'll just talk about all of these things. And to mention, you might have seen the OnlyFans in the shortcuts. I was watching one guy. Okay, I don't exactly have to prove it to you guys, but OnlyFans, you can see what a backend dev tooling OnlyFans who sent us here. This guy was showing us how the backend of OnlyFans is working. So you got the point. Uh, Proto Buff. So we'll be particularly talking about the Protobuf website itself. So I'm just going to This code. Okay. So now here I'm gonna initialize an empty this. So I will in this video I will show you exactly how you set up, how you encode and decode in the front end and how you encode and decode in the back end. So I will give you the idea. I will not be making any front end, but I will give you the idea. So with the help of that idea, you should be able to do this yourself. We'll say npm install express server and protobuf js. This is the library that we'll be using for protobuf javascript. And yeah, this is something that we'll be using. You can just copy this thing, or you can even copy the CDN for using it in the front end. Because if you're using React or some kind of web app like that, you can just say npm install protobuf.js. And other things are just the same thing. You encode, you decode, you load, and you look up. Very basic things in there, to be honest, guys. I'll just say index of JavaScript. So there are two ways actually to loading a proto format file in Node.js. So basically, either you can do the synchronous way or you can do the asynchronous way. I will show you both the ways. So let's set up our server first of all. Let's say app equals to require express protobuf equals to require protobuf.js. We also need the file system. File system equal to require fs. App.listen on process.env.port or port 3000. I don't care. So now let's make a new file with the name of user.proto file, and make sure you have extension of VS Code 3 Proto VS Code Proto 3 installed, because we'll be using the latest Proto version, which is the Proto version 3. And to set up a new Proto file, you first will need to specify which version of the Proto you will be using in the syntax tag. The syntax equals to double quotes. Just don't put the single quotes. Put double quotes, and in here let's say Proto 3 and put a semicolon to end the syntax. And then you need to specify the package name. Like basically, package and represent each profile as unique. Okay, so you make a couple of profiles and then you import them using the file system module. The Proto doesn't exactly know which file you're in, so you need to specify the package name so it exactly knows which file you're in currently. Because with the help of the file system module, you can literally import any file. So it gets a little bit more complicated if you don't mention a package name. So you're going to say package, and you don't need to mention something equals or something like that. Just mention the name. I would say the name is going to be users or user. Just go that same way. It's users. So when I say something like that, what now I should do? So now here we need to make schemas, like the structure of our data. So in a proto file, you mention the scheme structure, like how the data will be stored. When you make a JSON, when you set up a JSON request, you don't really must specify the structure of the JSON data. It can be sometimes integer, sometimes it can become a string, sometimes it can become this, that. So it becomes complicated in times, and it's not really best to rely on these kind of things for long-term things. So that's why, I mean, I don't mean to say like long-term things. I mean to say, like, if you want a very specific kind of data, like you want one the first thing to be integer, second thing to be this, second thing to be with the name of this, then you can use the proto buff, which does give you access to those kind of validation things. You can just say message and then the name of the thing. I will just say this is going to be for the response, or I can say request that I will make. So in the request, I'm just trying to do something familiar with the what the 777.in is doing. So basically they send the by default the mobile and password to the server, and that's exactly what I will be doing. So here you need to specify what is going to be the data value, like what is it going to be the data type of your value. So the data type of my string property name is going to be string. So I will just specify here string, and then the name of the property type or the key that will be in the object, and that's going to be mobile equals to 1. So this 1 equals to 1 just specify the position where our mobile is going to be in this object, and that's the first position. The mobile should be on the first position. So when you add the data, you need to first of all specify the mobile, and then so actually not actually like that. So when you first of all when you add the data inside it, when you will decode the data afterwards, you will notice like according the all the data was set up according to the positions you mentioned earlier. So if it says mobile is going to be on the first position, even though you specify this mobile equal to 1 at the very end, you will notice like it was added, it was shown in the first place. And we also want another string which is going to be password, and it's going to be on the position 2. You cannot have two things on the position 1. It's just going to show up error. We'll set up another one for the response also. So the response we got back was a code, and it was a message. So in order to show integers in a Proto file, you usually set int32, and then you just say my code equals to at position 1. But it's not like that. Just add the s int32, and this s int32 actually makes your integer work. Otherwise your integer shows up some error. So just add some s before it, and then we just say we have a string. The name of message is going to be at position 2, and that's it as of now. But no, I will also have another schema, so that will be for the array. Like if we have arrays in a proto files, and that's going to be something also that I will be mentioning in order to to show you guys, like if you use uh, protocol encoding, so what is going to happen, like how much data, how much size of the regressibility decrease or increase. We'll see that all of those things, and for that I will make another one which is going to be message bulk, and in here we need to have an array. And you cannot normally have an array like you have in JSON. You cannot say arrays, stuff like that. So basically what you have to do, you need to specify like which kind of structure the array is going to have. So you need to mention something like this, like I mentioned here, the response or the request. You need to mention like which thing is going to get repeated inside here. So like probably I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to have a bulk data of the request. So there's going to be a lot of mobile and password in this format. So what I have to do, I need to say repeated, and then I say request, and after saying repeated request, I need to say the name of the thing. So the name of my array, which I'm going to have the key with. So then I'm going to say, okay, select this key, and the value of the key is going to be something. So I need to specify key of this object, of this property name of this object, of this thing, okay, of this array. So I need to say what is going to be the key. You can say key is going to be array data, and the position is going to be 1. So this array data is going to be at the first position, and it is going to be repeated request. So repeated request schema leads to an array. So whenever you put a repeated here, even if you're only putting one data inside it, it's just going to become an array. And another really quick information to mention, like you can specify multiple, you can say a message bulk like that, and I can just call this a request, and I can just paste inside here, and it is going to work the same way. But the issue will be like you will not be able to access this request directly. Now whenever you want to access the request in your any node file or any react file or any other file, what you will have to do is basically you need to say, okay, users dot bulk dot request. So you need to just also go in the bulk and then access the request schema. So I'll just keep it the old way, and there we go. This is the thing. We set up our request, we set it up our response, and we did set it up our bulk data. And if we go back to our index of JavaScript, I told you there are two ways. So there were a synchronous way, and another one is an asynchronous way of doing the same thing. So synchronous way is a little bit more easier. So basically, what we are actually doing, like what do we actually mean by saying synchronous asynchronous? So basically, uh, when you start the like when you start the node application, what we are doing, whenever we are starting a node app, our server, we are just directly importing all these protobuffer files. So we're just loading them up. We're just getting the schemas out of them, like whatever we want. We want the request schema, we want the response schema, or we want the bulk data. So we're just getting them out. And then whenever anyone makes a request to our server, we're just encoding or decoding. We're just giving them some response back, basically, because we have already loaded the proto files, and then we're just giving the response back. But this thing gets a little bit more complicated when you do it in the front end, because and the thing is, like, in the front end you would have to load the file every single time. Or not actually, no, not actually. You don't need to load the file. Okay, my bad. It's just the same thing in the front end, unless until you don't have the thing on all the JavaScript on all the pages. You're using just HTML, and JavaScript, and you have multiple files having these protobuf things, so that's going to be complicated. So yeah, I get it. Now let's get into it. So the synchronous way of doing the thing will be like, I will just specify constant load proto. So in here I will load my user proto file. So to load a user proto file, all you have to do is just say protobuf that we imported as dot load, and then the path to your file. I would say protobuf dot load synchronously, because we are using synchronous method. So when you say load synchronously, that what's going to happen, all the code will be jammed. We will not be moving ahead unless until we don't get some response back from this user.proto, which means basically unless until we're not going to load this user.proto file properly fully, we will not be moving ahead. That's the issue with the synchronous way, but it should be okay as long as we want all these files to load before our server is starting. So yeah, you can say here user.proto. And now after loading it, what we need to do is basically we need to we need to select our schema that we will be using. So we'll be we'll be selecting multiple schemas because we'll need to deal with the bulk data. We'll need to set up the request of sending the request, and set up the thing of receiving the response, or you can say sending the response, or just say constant request equals to, so we need to say load proto and dot lookup. And here in the lookup you need to specify the package name that you want to select. The package name is going to be users. Let's say users, and then you need to say which schema you want to select. So in my case, I'm going to select this request schema, because this is going to be request file. Let's say request proto user.request, and then it is going to be kind of similar to others. All the response to proto, I'll have a users.bulk bulk proto, and I will have a response proto. You can see we have the bulk proto, so we don't have to even mention anything else in the bulk one. So these are the basic files, and we also need to load the JSON data, which will be first we'll parse it, and then I'll say file system.read file synchronously. I also want the read files thing to be synchronous. I don't want it to be asynchronous. I don't want to get some promises back, stuff is like that. And I will just mention data.json. We just make a new file with the name of data.json. Inside here we're going to have something like that, an object with the name of mobile, which is going to be password is going to be hello. Just do control D a lot of times. Oh, well, that's a lot of lines. 280,000 lines. Whoa. It's good for us to check bulk data. Okay, good, good, good. So this was a synchronous way. Now I will also mention the asynchronous way. So the asynchronous way of doing this, okay, let me just first of all mention the asynchronous way. I'll just commit it afterwards. So asynchronous way will be to use async await, or you can use that in promises. So we can just specify anonymous function, and to use the anonymous function, we need to make sure that we are ending the last line with the semicolon. I can just say here async anonymous function, call it by itself. I don't need any inputs. I can just say it as underscore. Here I need to say, so we cannot say constant load pro. We cannot say, yeah, we can say constant load protein. So basically, this load pro thing goes the same way. I need to specify this semicolon. So load pro is also the same for the synchronous and asynchronous methods. But the issue is like when we specify a request proto and or a response proto that will be needed in our requests. So if I say constant, it will be having this block level scope. So it will not be valid outside of this outside of this anonymous function. So the issue is like you cannot access this request proto variable outside of it. So you don't mention any constant, you don't mention nothing. You just say request proto equals to. So it will become a globally available variable which doesn't have any particular scope, which is available for everyone. So I can also show you. So it's just like the same thing without the constants. You just put in here without the constants. I can even show you that. I'll just okay, yeah, this is the synchronous way. My bad. I'll just put the file here and say load async. No, not async. It's a load, and you just say here await for the response we get back from the protobuf.load, and then we can just specify here the same things. I can even have an async method on the file system, but we need to use the file system extra in order to do that. Otherwise, we need to use a dot then promises. So dot then is a little bit irritating, and I get it. Put all of them here and remove the constant, so it just becomes the same thing. Got it? You got how to make the calls. Good. So I can just get rid of these datas. Let's put this one here. It's also synchronous call because it says sync, so it does the same thing. So now let's set up a few APIs. I'll say app.get / request. Now you get the request and the response from the server. Request -json. So in the request of .json, which means they want the JSON type request, or just say response.send. It's going to be, what is it going to say? Our mobile and the password. Okay, now there's nothing going to like request.json. We'll be setting just the buffer type. So just say make a new variable within a buffer or whatever you want. So we just select whatever proto lookup type we want to select. It's going to be our request proto that was set up here before, which has the users dot request schema added in there. So we just say request proto dot encode, and inside here you just put the object. You just put like whatever schema you added here. So we just say we want a mobile on the first position, and we want the pass, and the both can have the value of specified as password, because in the data digestion we added password, right? You would say mobile is going to be a string, then we'll have a password which is also going to be a string. I need to mention this, and then you need to say dot finish. So dot finish will return a success promise back to the buffer, so it will save the encoder value in the buffer variable. And then all you have to say, you need to say this response of send my buffer, and the expert.js is automatically going to set up your headers. It is going to set up the content type of your headers other than setting it as application /x proto. Buff, it will set it up as object stream application /object stream. So it's kind of similar to Protobuf, but it's just the way Express is setting up the default headers, so it doesn't really matter. You can go on with it. Okay. So you can also either specify your own custom headers with saying the request, the response of set headers, and then putting the content type, and then comma, and then your application slash dash x dash protobuf, and that goes the same way. So this was for the encoding of our data, and let me just also specify app.get for request dash decode in case we want to decode our data. We just say constant. First of all, in order to decode our data, we need to get the encoded data. We don't have the encoded data as of now, so we'll just copy paste this encoded data here. We're just supposing that we're getting the data from the server. I'm not saying we're getting from the server because it's a request, so we're just sending this to the server. But even on our side, if we want to check like what type of data we're sending to the server, we can get the data. We can just say constant decoder equals to request proto dot decode our buffer. You don't have to mention any dot finish function. You can just say response or send decoded. So that's what I was saying. Like you need to have the schema in order to decode or encode a message. So you cannot decode and encode a request other than while not having access to that schema. So this was a request encode and request decode, and we can do the same thing for encoding and decoding a response request. Response proto. So there's a difference. We need to say here we have a code and we need to put this thing in a number format. I'll say code is 404 and the message is failure to sign up. So in here I can just put it like that, and we got the response decode, and then we also specify a few APIs for slash JSON. So it will return back as the JSON data. Just going to be response dot send JSON data file that we added here, JSON data. I put it out top. You do the same. I can say slash, if you make a request to slash proto, I want the proto data. I can just say it like this. All I have to do is just say constant buffer equals to my bulk proto dot encode, and then I select my array colon. So I know I have an array key name here, array data actually, array data key name, and the value is going to be an array, which is going to be basically our JSON data dot finish, and all I say response will send buffer back. It will send back the buffer data, and I can say slash proto decoded. We'll just do the same thing. We say constant decode equals to our bulk proto dot decode our buffer, and then we send back the decoded data, which is basically going to be our JSON but in a decoded way, but in a decoded position. So just a node mon, say Postman. I want to put it here because there are a few requests that I don't want to show publicly. Okay, so now we'll make a new request. I would say http://localhost colon 3000 slash request. So let's see what we get in the request response. What data we get in the request. So you can see we got data like this, and it's definitely, if you try to view in a JSON format, it goes like this. We got like our number, and then we got have like square brackets, and then hello. So this is a protobuf format, and even if you go to headers, you'll notice the content type is being octet stream. So this is like what the Express thought it's actually being. So you can even specify your own custom headers, like I already mentioned. So this you cannot. So this is a protobuffer type, and it's not human readable, and I get it. And the time it takes to load it up is just more than it will take to load up a normal JSON request. So in order to actually show you these things, like what I'm saying is true, you can just say request decoded, and here I can just say constant decoded equals to my request proto dot decode buffer. And if I make, it's a request decode, kind of the same thing goes for, oh, I already specified the decode one, right? Yeah, my bad. So you can see it took us 22 milliseconds, and the size was 247 bytes. I copy it, I make a new request, request dash decode, and notice what happens. The time it took was 90 milliseconds, and I get it, it's not much of a difference because it's a small request. And even the size doesn't really much, has a difference. The JSON is a 277 bytes, and the Protobuf is a 247 bytes. And because it cannot really much compress itself while the size is so small, the content is so small. So you already see, the Protobuf is a little bit more smaller size. But I want to do one thing clear: if you're sending a very large amount of data, then it is going to have more time in consuming it, and the size is going to be pretty much smaller in Protobuf uh, in comparison with JSON data. So this was for the request. You see, actually, when you decode the request, you can see like mobile and password in a good way, in a good JSON way. But when you just see it in a decoded manner, in a encoded manner, of Protobuf, you just see it like that. So you just say same thing goes for the response also. So there's a little bit complication response. So the thing is, you don't even get to see you don't even get to see the code or what was the number of the code. All you get to see is like it is failure to sign up. Because the thing is, like, they convert all the things into a binary format, so the code gets mixed up in the numbers, and the numbers gets converted into these brackets. So that's why we only get to see this text. They will not even know if there is a number in here or not. So if I just say, okay, I want to get the decoded thing of this thing, can just say risk dash decode, and we got back, boom, we got back our code, and we got the message. And you can see exactly, I'm first of all doing what, I'm just first of all encoding the message like we did before, and then I'm saying a response with proto.decode my buffer, and it is going to decode my encoded protobuf message with the help of the schema. We doesn't need any secret key or something like that. It just needs to you need to make sure that you're using the same schema that you use to encode the message. So then you get decoded like that, and boom, there we go. And the actually game changing is like when you try to use the big data, like lot of big data, which is going to be in JSON. So you will not be using this much big data while you're dealing on a website. So that's why it's specified already. I'll prefer you to use a protobuf format if you're making requests from one API to another API, like one server to another server. So the request is going to be a little bit more smaller, and it will be much more easier for them to go on with the flow. So you can just say, if I want to get the JSON data, JSON. Okay, so it gave me this big amount of data. It took 156 milliseconds to get the data, to load the whole data, and the size was tremendous. It was 11.95 megabytes. And we're formatting this thing, and that's another thing. Okay, so it was 11.95 megabytes. Took 156 milliseconds to actually get all of this data inside of our request, to actually receive all the data. But if you go back, actually this is on my local server, so that's why it was so fast. Otherwise it would have taken a good amount of time if it was not on my local server. Now if you try to make the same request but with Proto format, notice the difference. So the time it took for us to load all these things was kind of like a triple of what it took in the JSON format, because I already mentioned here, like, by default, the browsers or any other like Postmans are not meant to receive the Protobuffers encoded message. They are more familiar with JSON types, and they do deal faster with JSON types. They don't really much deal faster with the protocol buffer encoding types. So they need to first of all load it up. They need to get the data properly, because they're not really much familiar with how does the protocol buffers work. They're not like many people do not use protocol buffer, so they don't really much care to optimize it. So yeah, there we go. You can see it took triple time to load a protocol buffer encoded response, even though the size is just the half of it. So here the size was 11.95 megabyte, and here the size is 5.84 megabytes. So if you have a data in millions in JSON format, I'll prefer you to use the Protobuf format for Protobuf encoding. So it just reduces the file size by twice the size. So if you have a 1 gigabyte of JSON data, it will make it 500 megabytes. But the response time I already mentioned, like it may double or triple your response time. It may take double or triple the time that it took for you to load a JSON data, and it will take triple or double of that data. Triple or double of that time to load a protocol buffer data. So you can see the data is still unreadable. If you want to make it readable, let's say proto-decode, hit Control plus Enter, decoded, and boom, we got back the decoded data. And notice what happens. Now the time it took for us to get the data was 707 milliseconds. And why was that? Well, basically the thing is, why did we took a lot of time to actually receive data? Well, because you can see, even we got to see this error data key. Well, because we first of all encoded this thing in the server, and then we decoded it, and then we sent them back the decoded data like this. So I hope you got the point. Why it took it literally took the 5 times the time it took us to receive a normal JSON data. So basically, we just first of all encoded it in the server and then decoded it afterwards. So decoding does take quite a bit of time. So yeah, you need to keep an eye out for that. You can see the size is pretty much the same thing because both are in the JSON formats. So the size doesn't really matter when you just see the data in the JSON format, but it just takes a little bit more time to decode encoded protobuf format encodings. So that was something that I was going to talk about in this video, and I hope you enjoy this one. And I will probably see you in the next couple of videos. And there we go. Have a nice day. And this was about for the protobuf, and I hope you will make good use of this protobuf formats, and I hope you will end up doing good in the future. So I will see you in the next one. Have a nice day.